Good morning, boys and girls. So we are on to chapter 8 in Snow Treasure. And where we left off last is the Defense Committee, which is all the kids, need to bring transport all that gold. So that's where we're at now. All right, let's see how this goes and if they can keep it from the Germans. All right, chapter 8. Well, what are you waiting for? Michael asked. You know the way to this cave, or whatever it is. He turned to Peter. What's wrong with going there and getting this thing started? Uncle Victor had left because he had been warned the Germans were on their way to Ryswick. Per Garson had shown him out, and the children were alone in the room. They could hear nothing after the sound of his skis had died away. Right, Peter jumped up. We're supposed to be seen near the beach today, so we'll have to get started. But first, there's something we should do before we begin any of this. I think we ought to make a pact that we'll never tell anything if we're caught. We won't get caught, Michael spoke. But if we are, he shook his crew-cut hair. I still think we should make a pact. We won't tell one word about what we're doing, about taking the gold to the snake. We'd hardly do that after what your Uncle Victor said about not so much as a word to stranger, Helga Thompson was scornful that Peter thought such a promise was necessary. But if we're tortured, if they try to make us tell, and torture us if we don't, Michael's eyes shone with excitement. What if they threaten to pull out our tongues if we don't tell? Not if our tongues were to be pulled out, would we tell? Helga shook her black curls. There'd be little sense in that if they really wanted us to talk. Lavisa could always see the funny side. Then you wouldn't mind swearing? Peter ignored Lavisa's interruption. If you're sure you wouldn't tell, you wouldn't mind pledging yourselves. Certainly I wouldn't mind swearing, Helga answered. No matter how I was tortured, I'd not say a single word. Peter went to the fireplace and climbed on a chair to bring down a sword his ancestor had used in wars against the Swedes hundreds of years before. He drew off its dried leather cover. Swear on this then. Hands on the blade. I swear, Helga put up her hand on the wide blade, and Lavisa and Michael put theirs beside hers. I swear, Lavisa's blue eyes were round. I swear, I'll have my tongue pulled out. I'll be tortured with a red-hot poker, and I'll have my head on a pole before I say a single word, Michael spoke excitedly. And I the same, Peter put the sword back. Now, we'd better be off to the cave for our loads. It's just us today. Tomorrow or the next day, we will take the others. Should we make them swear too? Michael asked. What's the use? They'll know they're not to talk to strangers. But maybe we should make them swear. After what Uncle Victor said in school about obeying without a question, I guess not. Peter had a great faith in his uncle. When he gave a command, it was obeyed. Come on, let's be going. Beat you to the sleds, Helga spoke. There's a scramble for the door. On the way, buttons were done up, and zippers made magic silver seams down the front of their windbreakers that had been loosened when the children came indoors. Per Garson, Peter remembered. He's to be at the cave to load the sleds. He ran to the kitchen to look for him. He was not there. Peter opened the kitchen door. Outside on the snow, he saw a strange sight. Per Garson was racing madly around and around on skis. Old and bent, he was nevertheless skiing with the grace of an Olympic entrant. He swooped and sailed. He would loop and then he would take off in a jump. Peter thought he had lost his senses. Then he saw there was a design in the crazy pattern he was making in the snow. All right, here he is right there, skiing. He's covering Uncle Victor's Tracks, he guessed, for had already been down the slope and had made cat steps all the way down to the hollow at its base. We're going now, Per Garson, he called. Ja, I go too. He made a mad leap and landed exactly at Peter's side. I see you by the woods. You know how to go, sure? Then he gave me a solemn wink, his old eyes screwed on his brown, wrinkled face. But so Peter had not the least doubt where to go. He told Per Garson so. Ah, it's good I see you there. He gave another long leap and began a long, swift flight through the churned snow. Peter raced around to the front to get his sled. What you do if you met a German right here? Michael tried to frighten the girls. I'd do just what I'm doing now, Helga's eyes flashed. I'd go on without much as a look at him, she sniffled. They all knew the way to Thor's Rock, so Peter found he wasn't much needed as a guide. Never mind. After they got there, he'd have to show them how to go around the wall of snow and into the cave. They trudged through the woods, taking all possible shortcuts. When they got to Thor's Rock and the place where the cave had been, Peter got the surprise of his life. There was no cave. Oh boy. And that leaves us to chapter 9. I kind of want to know what happens. All right. Let's go from here. All right. So they went there. They were going to start moving the gold, and the cave is gone. Okay. Let's see if the Germans found it or what. Chapter 9. Peter was sure he had not been mistaken, but here was Thor's Rock, and there was no cave anywhere that he could see. There had been a high wall of snow in front of it, he remembered. But look as he would, all he could see were young pines. Ole said it was where the rock curved so you could stand in a heavy rain and not get wet. That's here, he told the others, but for all they searched, they could find neither wall nor cave. It was Lovisa who spied Per Garson's brown face framed in the branches of a young fir. You said you could get here without help, he teased Peter when they came close. It's here all the time. There weren't any trees the other night. Peter felt ashamed. He had been so sure he knew just where to find the cave, but he had to be shown after all. These we fixed to make it seem more real, Per Garson explained. When Peter looked again, he saw that a strip of evergreens made a narrow corridor in front of the wall. You made it since the night I was here, since the night before last. Ja, Ole and some others, they came yesterday and finished before the blackout. Peter was still unbelieving, but sure enough, behind the trees was the wall of snow, and back of that the cave. Per Garson had led them around shrubbery to the entrance. Shouldn't someone stand guard over the door in case the Germans come? Helga asked. I'll do it. There's no need to, I think, Per Garson answered. Still, there's no harm to watch. Spies are everywhere. So Helga posted herself behind the tree where Per Garson had been waiting, and the others went into the cave. There was a strange kind of white light inside. Peter thought it might be like being in one of those sepulchres of the Bible, for the strong sunlight was cut down by the wall in front of the doorway, and a pearly beam fell on the sides and floor. Per Garson went at once to the end, where a stack of brown bricks rose up like a garden wall. Gold, Peter whispered to Michael. That gold? Peter agreed with Michael that it was hard to believe that each of those brown bricks was money enough to buy an airplane. Per Garson began lifting down the bricks. He laid 4 of them side by side on Peter's sled. Then he went to the far side of the cave to a pile of rough brown sacks like potato sacks, the bags that had covered the bricks on their journey to the cave. He carried one of those to Peter's sled. He folded it twice and laid it over the rectangle of bricks. Next, the rope. He produced a new clothesline, and with it began lashing the sack and bricks to the sled. Over and over went the rope. Then he drew out a long knife and cut the clothesline. We could help you, Pergarson, Peter suggested. Then we could start sooner. Nah, this must be done right. We could do it right. Nah. Your Uncle Victor holds me to blame if anything goes wrong. He says we can't have the rope coming loose and the bricks falling in the snow. One time for that, and the Germans would have our gold. They watched him take down more bricks for the next sled, then more for the next and the next. For an old man, he sure worked quickly. With each sled, the same procedure. First the bricks, then the sack folded twice, then the clothesline. Now, you tell Helga to come here. I think we can be safe these few minutes. Michael went to get Helga. She had seen nothing more than a few squirrels. Now, I show you how to untie the rope, Pergarson announced. When you get to the snake, you first look for a pair of trees that are fallen and covered with snow. They're about 200 feet apart. Be sure you find them, for that's the place your uncle thinks is safest. Now you untie the knots, and so, and so. Can you try it? Try. He laced the bricks onto the sled again, and Peter tried to untie them. He was clumsy at first. Instead of opening, he made the knots, but after a time, he learned how to untie the rope. When it came Helga's turn, she gave one quick pull, and the rope was dangling from her hand. Good. You learned things fast, Pergarson praised. Each of them had to prove he knew how to unload the sleds. Michael was slower than Peter to learn. He tried again and again, and each time succeeded only in making the knots tighter. Never mind, Peter was anxious to get started. I'll untie his for him. Nah, he'll have to know. Next time, he'll have to show his team. The lesson went on, and after a time, Michael learned the trick. And can you show the others? Michael felt he could. All right then, off with you. You bring back the ropes and sacks. These we need again, Pergarson instructed. For your pockets, here, he handed each a flat parcel. Your lunch, for supper you go to Holmes' farm, where you'll get plenty good hot meal. He led the way to the opening. Now, I think it's time you go. All right, let's see how this first journey goes. All right. Oh, boy. I see a picture. I got a hint. All right, that leads us to chapter 10. Until next time. All right, have a great day.